Hi, I'm Mike, VA3MW, and I'll take you through this tour of how to get your remote station started with a simple web switch and a couple of other key items to allow you to use your Flex 6000 series radio. By far the easiest way to get going is with a Flex Maestro, but we'll go through some other options for you as well. So welcome to the QSO Today Expo. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to share some ideas with you, and I hope you've gotten a chance to enjoy many of our other speakers. And we have our whole Flex channel that I think you'll find hugely interesting, from experienced operators to brand new operators. And all through the expo, if you have any questions about any presentation that is part of the Flex channel, feel free to email us at info@flexradio.com. Be glad to get it to the right person to get you some questions or even answer your question. So this video for me is long overdue because I've often been asked on what do we do to get started. That jump in the middle has been missing. And believe me, I know how you feel, because there are parts of the hobby, even recently, where I know what I'm doing, but how do I get it to work? And so hopefully I can get you through a little bit of a gap between wanting to operate remotely, like you saw me do with the Maestro a minute ago, running CW remotely to my remote station. It's about 150 kilometers away. And part of what I'm going to do is talk about how to do it simply and easily. We're not going to worry about amplifiers or rotators, just the basics of how do I turn things on and off, and a few other things. So we'll bring up the presentation here, and we'll get going. So see what we got. So what is operating HF remote? Well, it can be, because not sitting at this desk. It could be sitting out in the backyard. It could be sitting in another buddy's house. You may want to take your radio to visit somebody who's a shut-in. Those are all remote operating things. Or you could be like the person that sets it up. Okay, in North America, we set it up north in November, and then we head off to Florida where it's warm for the winter, but we still want to use our radio. Maybe just it's rag chewing on 80 meters. It could be contesting. It could be doing some FT8 or MSK 144, any of the digital modes, even CW operating. So we want to make sure it's not just limited to that. So we're going to talk a bit about how it goes together, some of the stuff I need to go buy, some of the things I need to worry about, and we'll go on. And we're going to scratch the surface in a couple of places, but hopefully I give you enough information about where to move forward or even to ask questions. And each one of these, when you're done, is going to be like a thumbprint. It will be unique. It will be yours. There's a lot of cases, there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just how I did it. And I'm going to really keep focusing as I go through on the KISS model. How do we keep it simple? So we have, let's assume we're going to have a radio. We're going to have one or two feed lines coming into the radio. So maybe a couple of dipoles or a vertical. Pretty common, reliable remote station is something like an HF6V or a G5RV type of thing. And we use the G5RV for the low bands. Gets us on 40 and 80, but then we use a vertical because it's got a better takeoff angle. But there are no maintenance antennas. You're going to need some internet, and it's going to have to be quasi reliable. So cable, DSL, fiber. And I've had a lot of questions about, what about Starlink? Price is sort of right, a little pricey, but latency times are all really good. The question is maybe. Today I'm going to say no. They're still in their beta phase. That could change. But it looks like they use something called carrier grade network address translation. And with that, it really will not support the SmartLink system we use, or a lot of other ones actually too. You're going to need a radio, maybe a Maestro. Would be handy if you have one, because that makes things a whole lot easier. A PC and a headset, probably a USB headset. Talked a little bit about the internet. Approximately 1.6 meg upload. Upload's going to be really key here. We really need the upload to get the data from the radio, what we want to hear, out of the radio into wherever you're sitting. And that's super critical. We're going to use a bit of Wi-Fi to control the web switch. I'm not a Wi-Fi fan, as I'm sure you've heard me say. However, I think that overrules this case with this web switch. We found that it was incredibly easy to configure. It was smart aware, and so, but it doesn't have a LAN connection. If it had a LAN connection, it would be absolutely perfect. I'm going to assume you've got a Flex 6000 series radio. After all, we are talking about Flex radio. And a very basic internet, which is actually, this is a normal home internet where everything is on what we call the same subnet. That's pretty much internet for home the way it comes out of the box. So don't worry about it unless you've done something different. And if you're not sure if you've done something different, have a look at Dan N7HQ's presentation on LAN and the Ham Shack. I actually just watched it. We just recorded it. It'll be Saturday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 o'clock Saturday night on Eastern, or 1 a.m. Sunday UTC. And there's a lot of good data in there. Really good stuff. So cool. Let's talk about the web switch. Now, the web switch, we're going to use it to turn the AC power on and off to our 12-volt power supply. We're going to use it to turn the radio on and off. There's a great feature in the radio. We might even wire up another lead into the back of the radio, the push-to-talk lead into the back of the radio for what we call smart link push-to-talk. Hopefully you'll never need to use it, but there is that occasional time you might need it. And then we have a spare relay left over we can do something with. And no, it's not going to look like that big knife switch we have either. There's a whole, by the way, at the web switch discussion, there's 100 different options. This is the one we liked. And we've got it written up on how to configure it. So the S-on off 4-channel Pro web switch, I've been able to find them pretty much all over the world on Amazon. They work with Alexa, Google Home, iOS, and Android. And they run their own app called the Smart Home Center, or the EW Link app. It's safe enough. I use it. If you're concerned about third-party things on your phone, well, you're going to have to go down a different path. But this works. And then we're going to talk about a Internet of Thing relay. They're not very expensive, and they handle 110 volt switching without having to do anything special. Now, I apologize for you in the rest of the world where you need 220 volt switching. I don't have a good answer. While I expect they exist, nobody sent me one to look at, but I'm sure you can be creative and you can ask in our Flex community. I'll give you pointers to that near the end of the broadcast. This is the SON off, or SON off 4-channel Web Pro relay. In fact, I have one right here. So we'll just full screen me for a minute. And this is what it looks like. It's really well made. It's got nice little terminal strips to hook things up. It will actually run on DC 5 volts to 24 volts. So you're going to need a wall cube for that to plug it in, and don't use your 12-volt power supply, because if you turn it off, it's going to go off. You can actually also feed it from AC 90 volts to 240 volts AC on a different set of leads. And you can plug it in the wall, or you should plug it into your UPS. And you can actually manually switch some buttons here. They're not really expensive, and they're pretty reliable. So we're pretty happy with that. So go grab one of those, or 2 or 4, and you can just keep building and making it bigger as you add stuff. We'll go back to our slides, and this is how it wires up. And I'll explode this a bit for you so you can see. The power hooks up here. And I didn't mention that, but you could actually use the same wall cube that I'm going to recommend you use for this, which is one of these. I'll give you a bigger picture of that in a minute. This is what we're going to use to turn our AC power supply on and off, and maybe something else. The switches are either normally open or normally closed, so you have to decide, do you want it when there's nothing to it? Do you want the power on or power off? We have this is an RCA connector. One of them is going to plug into the remote on off into the back of the radio, and this RCA connector is going to connect to the push to talk lead in the back of the radio. We're going to use that one for a remote push to talk. That's part of a security feature with Flex radios. The odds, as I said earlier, you'll never need it other than the first time, but it's sort of handy to have just in case you change your password on your login. Then you will be required to hit the foot switch. Well, it's pretty hard to hit the foot switch if we're nowhere near the foot switch. So that's why that's there. On the back of, or rather in the software, Smart SDR, there's a setting under radio, settings, radio. Here it says remote on. You want to make sure that that is enabled. And then we're going to plug that RCA connector into this REM on connector in the back of the radio. And I'm so happy they thought about this in day one, but it turns the radio on and off. When it turns it off, it leaves it in a very low power state. You can leave it like that forever. And then you can choose to turn on and off your 12 volt power supply. Personally, I leave my 12 volt power supply on all the time. And should you have a power failure and your power supply goes off, that's okay. There's no problem. The radio will recover very well. Oh, you know what? I did promise I would talk about this. So let's go back to me. This is the Internet Digital Logger AC power switch. I like it because it's really simple. And if you're maybe going to build a Raspberry Pi web switch or use our Node-RED stuff that a bunch of guys are using, you can actually connect this right to a Raspberry Pi just with these two leads right here, and no soldering required. And there's no intermediate board or level change or anything you need to make it work. It's got an onboard circuit breaker. Now, if you trip that, you need someone to go reset it. But, you can see it's really well made. The only thing that would be nice to have is if it had ears on it to screw it to a wall. Well, by the way, just a regular machine connector. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't. If you watch the video on my QRZ page, you'll see I use 3 or 4 of these. I just use 3M tape on the back and I've stuck it to the wall. It's been there for a couple of years, no issue. So you want to get a little carried away, we can go to the Digital IO Logger. This is a Pro Switch. They're about $169 US in the US. They're again 110 volts. I actually think they'll run at 220. You may want to check the documents. They are Wi-Fi LAN based. You can do a lot of stuff with it, including ping to see if the internet's up or not, and if it's not, turn on and off a switch that may power cycle your modems and your internet stuff. I had one for a while. I actually didn't like it for a number of reasons, but that was just me. Most of that being I found the configuration a bit of a challenge, and there was no user GUI that just said, hey, I just want a very simple GUI. And that's sort of the complaint that some people have. Now, I haven't looked in over a year now. Maybe that's changed. But I know some of our Node-RED guys, which is a machine-to-machine Raspberry Pi communication. You can watch Dave WO2X presentation on Sunday morning about that. Dave's presentation goes over Node-RED, and don't get scared about it. If you want to tinker a little bit and learn a little bit, it's a great tool. It's not really programming, and I think a programmers would look at that and go, it's not really programming, but the point is we can make you successful using it. And he's written a really nice GUI for this thing. So if you're serious, you may want to look at this switch. So how do we connect to the radio? Well, we use our Smart SDR client. We've got Smart SDR, which runs on a PC. We've got Smart SDR for Mac, which runs on a Mac. Funny how that works out. We've got Smart SDR for iOS. Guess where it runs? We have a Maestro, which is a standalone station that sits on your desk. It's beautiful. It's got this big 8-inch display on it. Do you know every other display out there is only 7 inches? We have 8-inch displays. Make it a little bit bigger and just the right number of knobs on the front panel. I can go on for about a half hour on the Maestro. What else can we do with this? So there's a lot of options. Okay, where's the Android one? I can hear that question. There's nothing preventing anybody from developing one. I don't think we're going to. There's no plans to do an Android app, at least written by Flex Radio, but or Linux for that matter. Same answer. But the API, something called the Application Program Interface, is open to allow anybody to write their own should they choose to do so and bring it up and make it work. And we would be happy to give you some guidance on that. So if you're that type of person and you've got those skills, please reach out to us. We've got people you can talk to. But every way that you can control the radio is available on a LAN connection. So if you're in that world, you know exactly what I mean. And that's exactly how the Maestro works, from sending CW to adjusting filters to changing frequency to showing the waterfall, etc. And if you wanted to make an Android app and you're worried about managing the waterfall, don't. Heck, you could write an Android app or a Linux app, I guess, just to get going and not have a waterfall, but still have a VFO and knob and sound and etc. So it's pretty cool. And then when you're all done, don't forget to test things. So you get it sort of working. You want to get away from your house and, go to your friend's place. Okay, this is COVID. So you have to go outside your friend's place and, connect to his Wi-Fi sitting on his driveway and see if you can control your radio. Unplug everything, plug it back in, make sure it comes up the way you think it should. Otherwise, you could be in a surprise where, you had a power failure and you didn't quite check something. Get your friend to check. We have videos on the Flex YouTube channel. One of them says, my friend, I think it's titled, "My friend said I could use his radio remotely." And so you get him and say, "Hey, can you use my radio remotely?" So this is what, testing's all about. Now we're going to go now you're on the air. You know what? You're done. If you want to be done, you're done. You can now turn the power on and off. With the remote web switch, you can do a secure foot switch test or re-registration for SmartLink if you have to. The Flex radios control 2 antennas, so we were only going to worry about 2 antennas, and we're going to run barefoot. You know what? You got a station. It's on the air. You're ready to go. Might be all you need. But if you want to go a little further, then let's go about 2 key pieces first I think you need to add. And one of them is, how do I reboot my modem if something goes wrong? It's a pretty common problem. And then I want you to install a PC or a laptop local to the radio, and I'll explain why. And we're going to a little bit touch on antennas, routers, and amplifiers. So I found this tool online, this internet modem watchdog. And it's $49 in the US. I'm sure there are others all around the world. If you're a do-it-yourself guy, it's easy to use. There's lots of scripts to dig out that Raspberry Pi again and dig out one of these and have it automatically turn the power off to the modem if there's no internet. In fact, that's exactly what I do on my remote. I've got one of these plugged into a Pi. It's its only job. Actually, it does one other thing. I think it's the VPN that I sometimes use as a backup. And if there's no internet, it checks every 20 minutes. And if I can't ping 3 sites like Google.ca, CNN, Yahoo, then it says, well, geez, the internet's down. Let's turn off the power to the modem for 30 seconds and bring it back up. And that works really well. It has saved me numerous trips. In fact, back in 2005, when I first started it, this was my first thing that took me offline. My cable company had pushed some firmware up to the modem. I guess it didn't recover very well, but the simple fix was go unplug the modem. So I phone up there and I say, it's December, it's a cottage. We're not there. And I go, have we something wrong? He goes, oh, no, Mr. Walker, it's good. Just unplug your modem and plug it back in. You'll be fine. I'm an hour and a half away. So drove up there, grabbed a classic Christmas tree timer from Canadian Tire on the way. The Canadians know who that is. Plugged it in, and then every day at 3 a.m, the modem would automatically reboot with this Christmas tree timer. And I thought that was good enough. At least if I had a problem, I was out for no more than 23 hours and 45 minutes. I guess it'd be 24. There's probably a lot more of them out there. I haven't tested one, so if somebody actually grabs one of these and gives it a shot, I'd love to hear how it worked for you. The local PC. This is such a fun discussion we've had in our forums and stuff. And first, the reason we want to do it is, if you put a PC local to the radio, you can now just set up one PC with all your amateur stuff, your logging, your N1MM, your WSJT or whatever. And it all runs nice and beautifully local to the PC and doesn't stress your internet by trying to move the audio. It also gives you much more reliable digital operations. And it also gives you a tool to do some diagnostics in the network in case you ever need to do that. Now, the scary part for some people is, well, do I have to leave it on all the time? And I'm going to say yes. Take an old PC you have, put Windows 10 Pro on it, decrapify it, which means you take off everything. I don't run antivirus on mine. I don't need it. I'm not surfing the internet on it, and it's already behind a firewall. And I know there's some purists out there rolling over in their chair, but that's just the way I do it. And I run, I don't use TeamViewer. I use AnyDesk and a couple other tools to connect to it remotely. And you know what? This is what I contest on. I use that screen for my contest software. I use that screen for running WSJT. I also use that screen if I need to make any changes to my network or my firewall, and that has happened. And if you're really far away, I guarantee this, you really need to do this. It is plug it into a UPS to protect it, but you want to make sure if it ever shuts down that it starts up. Every computer I've ever used today is capable of doing that. It's often called a BIOS setting. We don't go into the BIOS much like we used to 10 years ago, but it's just a simple boot up, press delete or F2 or F1 to go into the BIOS. Don't get freaked out. It's not real. It's not real ugly. And there'll be a setting, where it probably says on power failure, resort to last setting or always power up or something like that. Every server guide turns that on. So there's a lot of value to having that there. AnyDesk allows you to connect to it. TeamViewer, if you like, although we're sort of getting away from it because of their licensing restrictions. VNC, Microsoft Remote Desktop, Chrome Remote Desktop, lots of videos online about how to do that, which is all good. And as I said earlier, this is why we want to run a remote PC. And like I said, on mine, I've got FR Stack, Slice Master, the whole 9 yards. And the beauty is if I want someone else to use my shack, it's easy for me just to lend it to them. And I go, here, just log into my computer. Everything's configured. You're on the air. You want to run some digital stuff. You run Smart SDR. So I guess this should be really clear about this. I'll run Smart SDR on my PC so that I get my great user experience of the waterfall, the pan adapter, and my headset's plugged into the PC on this computer, and my foot switch or my hand switch, I use foot switches, or my Maestro, I can still use all that with me, remote to the radio. But all the other stuff where I don't need to move all that data, I keep it local to the radio. And that de-stresses my internet upload, which is usually something we're limited to. I used to do a talk saying, anywhere you can find great HF operating, you got bad internet. Now that's sort of going away with some of which fortunately, and hopefully with Starlink and a couple of others. But yeah, let's keep that in mind. And again, don't forget to test it. And then I know I won't go into depth into security, but we do a secure connection. SmartLink is a secure connection to your radio. There's security keys involved. If you run AnyDesk or many of these other tools, they have a secure encrypted connection. Yes, we open a port. It just goes to the radio. It doesn't go anywhere else. We use universal plug and play. Again, you should probably turn that off, but then you need to know how to do port forwarding. If you don't, leave it on. I'll leave a gap here for all my security guys that again say this is bad. Don't turn on universal plug and play. They're probably right. I've never turned it off in 20 years and I've never had an issue. I mean, somebody wants to get in and hack around on my system. I don't know what you're going to find, but knock yourself out. But I'll find you eventually. This is what, the Maestro is the ultimate tool. And if you've got one, you're ready to go. And if you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see why. All that stuff that we use in our station, the key, our powered speakers, our headphones, our push to talk, any one of either plug-in computer headsets or my hand mic or an INRAD mic plug or anything Yaesu plugs right into the back of the Maestro. Boom, I'm on the air. I've got knobs that work really well. I can adjust every feature of the radio with this. Certainly the way to go if you just want the plug and play experience. Really enjoy it. And you can use that locally in your own house, or you can get away with your house and get on SmartLink and connect from some remote access point. Heck, there's just so many things you can do with it. This is probably part of the reasons we can't keep them in stock. If you're not going to use a Maestro and you're going to run Smart SDR in your PC, much like you do normally, grab a Flux control knob. It travels well. I've got one right here. Okay, how about right side up? The knob feels really good. Quite often in a contest, I'll use Smart SDR on the PC, and I may or may not use my Maestro for the contest because I'm trying to get my hands. Contesters like not to take their hands off the keyboard. So, and when I traveled as a road warrior for a long time, and I was using a laptop, I had a USB headset plugged into the laptop. I had my flex control knob for a VFO, and I built a push-to-talk foot switch that went with me that used some hardware. I'll talk about that in a minute. But you can also program push-to-talk right here on the Maestro. If you're rag chewing, I can just hit, aux1 like this, and turn the radio into transmit, hit it again to turn it off. Works really well. Less confusing way to do that is we talked about the Maestro part. That's one way. You can run Smart SDR and just push with your mouse the MOX button on Smart SDR, puts the radio in transmit. You can run FR stack, and that allows you to program a hotkey or any key to go in and out of transmit. You can see in the sample here, and I'll zoom this up a bit for you. I have it set to control spacebar. Okay, control spacebar, talk, control spacebar, back to receive. You could do a function key. There's FR stack supports a couple of other methods. There's also a way with FR stack to connect a foot switch right into FR stack and just use it like you're maybe used to, or a hand switch. And we have a whole discussion on that in the Flex Radio community with a couple of different options. There's 3 or 4 that I know of, and there's probably more. Now, what about CW? Now, we have a built-in keyer in the radio. And you think, geez, why can't I just take a pair of paddles and wire, for you technically inclined guys, wire that into 2 of the RS-232 levels and, send, data set ready for dash and, or would it be, data terminal ready for, you get the idea, for DIT. And you know what? Technically that works. And you can do that today with a couple of different programs. However, it doesn't really work. It works, but it's not really usable. And because the internet leads and lags, it has latency, which is how long it takes to get the data back to you, but it also has jitter, and that's sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's a little slow, sometimes it's a lot slow. And you can see in the graph I've included here on the right-hand side, that's just a short graph of me pinging my station over the internet from my house. Now, I used a VPN to do it because it just kept it nice and simple. But, we went from about 35 milliseconds ping time, but all of a sudden it just goes to 75. And that's with nobody doing anything. And this is why remote CW is so difficult to do. Or let me rephrase that. That's why remote CW is not that simple to do, but we do have solutions. There's a win keyer built into the Maestro that makes that work really well. So it works beautifully. There's a couple of other options here online. The CW keyboard, where you can actually send CW with your keyboard and just type stuff in. But I find that really good CW operators don't type very well. They want to use their paddles. Logging programs like N1MM, HRD, and 3FJP, et cetera, I think it has it, have built-in WinKeyer emulation. So you can do that where you can just send CQ from your logging program or whatever. And there's 2 other solutions here. One by Italy Whiskey 7 Delta Mike Hotel has a remote keyer interface circuitry. And then another group of guys called the Remote Keyer Interface actually takes something like a actual WinKeyer. I actually have a little one from hamshop.cz that I built right here. And you actually have to wire a cable into the back of an RS-232 port on your radio with a USB adapter, and you can get the best of both worlds. So you can read more about it at those sites. And lots of guys are doing that, and they're loving it. That gives them the best of both worlds. So in case you don't know, in your internet world or your remote world, and you're starting to hook stuff up, what if I want to control my amplifier or antenna switches or whatever? On the back of the radio, there's a USB connection. Actually, there's 2, and you can actually put a powered hub on there if you want more. One of them, and there's 2 options. You can put a classic RS-232 cable made by FTDI, or the FTDI chipset, right into the back of that radio, and that gives you Kenwood cat data coming from the radio. Now, what does that mean? It means that every time you change frequency of the radio or band data or bands from the radio, it sends that information out of the back of the radio, and that can be connected to multiple different amplifiers or band switches or antenna switches or pretty much anything else, transverters even, that recognize the Kenwood command set, which is good because most devices do. So you can have them automatically track frequency, steppers. There's a whole lot of things. And the other one, like the picture on top, is got 8 levels on it, and we can use that to emulate BCD data, Yaesu's BCD output format, and or you can turn it into bit format, which says, hey, if I go to 20 meters, I want this bit high. And there's relay boards you can actually also plug right into the back of the radio by Demvoki. And that just gives you a bunch of relays that go back and forth. Again, well discussed in our Flex community, and they really make the integration for a remote operator so much easy. You don't really have to invent stuff, just more stuff you can buy over the shelf. Again, if you're thinking of going down that path, feel free to email us. I'll have that at the end, and we'll give you some guidance on it about where you can go. Let's talk about remote antenna switches. Now, my favorite is the 403A switch because it's flex aware. It plugs into the LAN. It just works. If you have a radio with 2 spectral capture units, like a 6600 or a 6700, and you're flipping back and forth between those 8 antennas, this just integrates beautifully. And it's perfect for the SO2 operator, especially the SO2R remote operator. They also have a 1x8 switch. We haven't brought that in yet. We're looking at that possibly, but it is still available from 403A online. There's a whole bunch of kits on eBay for remote antenna switches where you can use Kenwood cat data or that bit mapping I was talking about a minute ago. Remote QTH has some pretty cool antenna switches. You'll have to build those. Remote Big has a remote controlled antenna switch. And then on the bottom here, maybe you've got something you can easily modify on your own, and you can take the relay board I was talking about, and you can interface this. I just found this online. It was courtesy of N1 Alpha Lima. So if you did the schematic, thanks. But you could replace this part in red with a bunch of relays and have it automatically change antennas with you. So you may already have enough stuff to make it work. You just might have to break out the schematic and have a look. And so that's pretty slick. A lot of rotors are coming out now with rotators that have RS-232 ports on it. There's a lot of add-ins. There's Easy Rotor Control has an add-in. Idiom Press has an add-in. The Idiom Press one's a fun little project. If you're a little foreign to maybe wiring up stuff, there's a lot of room to work. I've done it to probably a dozen high-gain rotors. Easy Rotor Control for Yaesu. 403A, so it works on anything. I'm going to be installing an Alpha Spid, so I'm going to use my 403A Rotor Genius on that. And then PST Rotator is the software you're going to run on that PC that we were talking about earlier, and it will control just about any rotor. And I'm pretty sure Dog Park software has ability to control rotors for you Mac guys as well. Now, amplifiers, same thing. It gets a little more complicated because you're probably going to want to turn off your 220 volt line. As I said earlier, I haven't got a good 220 volt solution, but they do exist. Our European friends may have some ideas. You really have to check with your building, your electrician and building codes. I'm not going to say build your own relay and go do it because I can't. That may have, some of you might have, but please make sure you're legal. Do not compromise your house insurance for that. And then if you're in your remote station, what about heating? What about cooling? What about animals? What about security? Well, for me, I have mine in a boathouse. The temperature of the boathouse varies between minus 30 Celsius and plus 30 Celsius. I have everything in a box. You can look at the video on my QRZ page. A wooden box. There's no extra heating in it, and there's a lot of fans in it. So during the winter, I have a 70 amp Astron power supply that I never turn off, and a Windows PC, a full mini PC. They produce enough heat to keep that box above freezing, which is sort of my goal. If I'm really stuck, I actually turn the amplifier out of standby into operate, the PGXL, because the bias is on all the time, and that produces about 6 watts of heat. So that keeps it warm enough. But I've run for years with no heat, and I've survived just fine. And yes, it is a boathouse, and the humidity varies between plus 20 and plus 99. I've been at this for 2005. I've never had a humidity concern. So your mileage may vary, but just get on and keep an eye on things. My remote control box panel here, which is the one on the right, has temperature sensors. And when I took this picture, it was wow, it was really warm. It was 9 degrees outside and 18 degrees in the box. So do worry about animals from getting in there and chewing things. They never bothered any cables I have running around on the ground, except my internet cable. The raccoons like to chew on it, or the porcupines. So about twice a year, I have to walk down the whole cable because it lies on the ground through the woods for about 900 feet or 300 meters. So why don't I hang it in the tree? Well, you know what? Trees fall down. So I did that one year. Trees fall down. They always land on the cable. And if the cable's in the tree, the cable breaks. So I found the ground was a lot more reliable. And just, you do have to do an inspection. Security, yeah, you do want to make sure it's reasonably well locked up. And odds are, if somebody really wants to get to it, they're going to. So I have a lot of hidden web cameras. So I'm going to get your picture. In fact, I'm going to get your picture long before you know I got your picture. But that's just me. Fortunately, these areas are pretty remote and hams are pretty good. So we have this community. Great place to go look. It's all about remote. We've got a lot of things in our community, community.flexradio.com. A bunch of different categories. Jump in there, ask questions. We have a page on Facebook called Flex Radio Enthusiasts. Another good place to ask questions. And you can email us at info@flexradio.com. Let's see what else we got here. The YouTube channel, as I said. And of course, QSO Today, we're around. You can come in and talk to us. I'll be in and out because I guess I'm going to have to moderate a lot of presentations, which is good. I want to give a shout out to Mike V3CKO, who made this beautiful web-based GUI for his PST. Yeah, I don't know if he used PST Rotator. I do know he used our tool that Dave WO2X is talking about called Node Red, and it's pretty slick. You can see his weather station or a local airport weather station, and his antennas automatically keep turned into the wind. He was bragging about this the other day when it was really blowing about over 40 knots here in Toronto, which is a whole lot of wind pressure, so just subtropical. So I'm recording this now, but I'm here, and we've got any questions, feel free to jump in and ask questions. Again, you can also reach me at info@flexradio.com, or my call sign at va3mw@flexradio.com. Be glad to help you out. I'll give you some guidance. I probably won't write it for you or tell you exactly how to do it for you, but I will coach you to get you going in the right direction because, hey, it's a learning hobby. So thanks for your time. I hope we've given you some ideas. Good DX. Enjoy the rest of the QSO today, and don't forget to tell your friends. Take care. 73.